You've probably heard of Node and Express, and in this video, we're going to do an introduction to both. So you end up with an API, and you're going to end up playing with the API using PostMan that take you through GitHub. But this time we're going to do it on the CLI. We're going to use the Git CLI and some other commands. Let's have a look at the course information. We're going to set up a Node project with Express, and we're going to do get parameters in the URL, also with routes that accept a post. And we're going to test this using PostMan. My channel is about open source and web development and getting you the job that you deserve. Remember, open source and GitHub is not just about code, it's also about communication and collaboration, where if you want to succeed in tech, those skills are just as important as coding. If that sounds interesting to you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel below, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time I post a video and go live. Let's start this course. Just like with all the other GitHub Labs that we've done together, I recommend making it public. GitHub Lab will create a repo under our account, and then it will give us instructions on what to do next. So let's start on step 1. It's opened a new tab and taken us to the new repository under our account. As you can see, it says Eddie Jowd Node Express course. And let's see what it says. Prepare your environment. Traditionally, JavaScript is a browser-side programming language. However, Node gives you the ability to run JavaScript files on the server side. Express is a library for Node.js that allows you to make requests from different endpoints and get a response back. And by endpoints, we're talking about API RESTful endpoints. For example, if you want to get a list of data, you will use a get with no parameter and it will list all the data. For example, /users. And you would also use a get to get a single user with more information by using /users/123, where 123 would be the user ID. Where if you wanted to add a user, you would do a post rather than a get to the /user endpoint. So let's create our Node project and add Express to it. To get started, let's close the issue. And the bot automatically adds the next step. Click here to get started. So let's go. And it's given us the installation commands. I'm not going to go through every line. When you do this lab yourself, you can read through all the details, but I'm just going to pull out the interesting parts. So first of all, it says to clone the repo that just got created. So let's do that. It gives us the command, which is git clone, and it clones that repo. Now we've cloned the repo, we've got it locally, so let's navigate into that. The next step, it talks about two files, gitignore and server.js. So let's open VSCode and have a look at those files. You can do that by typing code space dot, and that opens VSCode in the current folder. And as you can see, we've got a gitignore, which has our node modules folder because we want that ignored. And we've got server.js, which has nothing in it. So next it's telling us to initialize the project as an NPM project. NPM init is usually enough, but it's going to ask us lots of questions. To avoid those questions, we can answer yes to everything. And now it's created a packaged JSON file. Next, we want to add Express as a dependency. And it's given us the command for this already. This has now updated our packaged JSON file with Express 4.17.1, which is probably the latest stable. And next, we need to push those changes to our repository. It says git add, git commit, and then git push. So let's have a look. Because if we go do a git status, you can see these two files are not tracked. And you can also do this in VS Code. On the left, you have the changes, so it's saying these two files aren't tracked. I use the command line more, so let's do that. If we do git add dot, always do a check as what's been added. Again, you can look at it down the left or do a git status -s just to make sure you haven't added any private files or system files that you don't want. And then let's do a commit. Now those files have been committed. They are still only local. We need to push it up to GitHub to appear on GitHub. If we have a look, the last commit isn't from us because we haven't pushed it up yet. The files are still local. So do a git push origin master. I need to type in the password, but you probably won't need to. It depends on your Git configuration. Now I've pushed that up. If I go back to GitHub, we have a look, the last commit is from me now. And the GitHub Lab bot already knows that we've pushed the code. As you can see, now you've pushed up those changes in your repository. It should look like this. And then we can click here for the next step. So at the moment, we've got the Express dependency in our Node project. However, we haven't got any code. It doesn't do anything yet. So let's get that set up. So on this next step, we're going to create the Express server. These two lines of code are the typical way to include Express. The require gives you access to the Express library, and then we call the Express function and we save it to the constant app. Next, we're going to use the app constant and we're going to say listen on port 8000 and do a console log. Now we've got some code that allows us to run the Express app locally. Let's run this file and see what happens. Now it's running, it says server is running in the console, but nothing else exciting is happening. Let's get on to the next steps and see what the next steps are to make it more exciting. Okay, the next step is to commit this code. Okay, let's follow the instructions. If we do a git status again, we've made some changes. We can see on the left what the changes are. Happy with that. So let's commit it. So git commit. We don't need to do the add this time. There are two ways you can commit the file. You could add it, which means it takes it from unstaged to staged, and then you do a commit without specifying any files or paths, and that will automatically commit the files that have been staged. Or you can omit the git add, as in the staging part, and when you do your commit, you can pass the path or files to be committed, which is what I normally do. Do a status, I'm happy with that, and let's push that up again to the master branch. Now we've done that, this issue's already been closed. The bot is listening to the changes that we're pushing up, which I think is excellent. Now we've learned how to run JavaScript on the server side outside the browser. Let's do some more interesting things. Now the next step is let's add a root and return some mock JSON data so we can do a GET request on our API. So what we're doing here is we're creating a constant called mock user data, and we've got an array of objects. Let me separate it on multiple lines to make it a bit clearer. So we've got an array, which is a collection, and we've got two objects with the name Mark and the name Jill. And then we're telling the Express app that we want a get endpoint on /users. And then what we're going to do is the response is going to be JSON, it's going to be success true, and the message is successfully got users. Nice. And we're going to return the users with the mock data. If I hit save, and then run node server.js just like before, we should get the same response, server is running. And now if we go to the browser, let's have a look, see what we get. And now you can see if we go to localhost 8000 /users, we actually get success true, message as we wrote in the file. And we do also get a users array of the two user objects that we put in our file. So now we've got an API RESTful endpoint with not a lot of code. This is how powerful Node and Express is. Let's see what the lab asks us to do next. Now let's stop the Express server with Control-C and commit these files. Ooh, we've made our first endpoint. Let's see what's next. Okay, it tells us that by using colon and then a variable name, we can access parameters in the URL, which is awesome. We can have the endpoint accept parameters in the URL. This is great for accessing and getting a particular resource, in this case, a particular user. I want to make a slight change to what they're suggesting in the lab, and I might regret this later, but let's see how it goes. Let's give each of these an ID. So we'll give Mark an ID of 1, and we're going to give Jill an ID of 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to add ID as a URL parameters, part of the path. So it's not an optional GET request. It's actually part of the path. And then what I'm going to do is filter the data based on the ID. So we've still got the endpoint /users, and that will return all the users. But I'm also going to do one where you can pick a particular resource. Where we're going to do that is with a find. And rec.parameters.id allows us to get parameters out of the URL. If I run that again and go to the browser, now if I put the resource ID at the end of the URL, users /ID, you will see that we output ID 2, but we also get the specific user, which is ID 2 and name Jill. And I can also change that to 1, and now it returns Mark. And if I remove the number, if I remove the resource, it's going to list all the resources, and I'm going to get both people. I'm happy with that. Let's commit it. Okay, so the next we're going to do a post, and post can be used for creating a resource. Post could also be used for logging in because you're actually creating an authenticated resource. It could be a token, but we also need to include the body parser, so it will pass the JSON for Express. And so just like before, when we include the Express app, we also include the body parser out of our Node modules. And then we need to tell app, which is the Express app, to use the body parser and the JSON function. Body parser is automatically included with Express in the Node modules. The next is giving us a post function, as you'll see app.post. Before we're using app.get. So now our app will accept post requests. And it doesn't matter where you put this code in the file, as long as it's after app.use, and above app.listen. It needs to go between those, but it doesn't matter the order that these appear in just yet. In the future it can do, because it will match the first one that it finds. But in this case, because we're using post and get, they will be different. And this is just a mock login system. Do not use this for your login system. We have a lot of hard-coded data here, which should never be the case. Normally you would have a database. So we've got app.post on /login. So if we do a get to that, it's not going to respond. It's only going to respond to a post. The next thing we do out of the request body, before we used request params because it was part of the URL, now we use request body, and then we pull out username and password, and we've also got the mocked version which we would check against a database normally. And then if it matches, and if they're both match and both correct, then we'll say, brilliant, this is where your token would go, and this is your message. And if it fails, we'll return that they do not match. Let's hit save, and let's run the server and see. Node server.js. Before we were sending the request to the browser, you could use something like PostMan. VSCode has various RESTful clients. I'm using one here called REST client. It allows me to write in a file. I could also commit to the project. It allows me to write various requests. So let's just start off with listing the users like we did before in the browser. If I send the request, as you can see, I get 2 results, Mark and Jill. To separate these, it's 3 hashes. And let's create another one. Instead, we're going to take users /2, which is an ID of 2, and we expect to get 1 result. And now we have 1 result with ID of 2. We have added the endpoint for posts login. Let's try that. We need to change this get to a post. We want no ID at the end, and we need to have a body. With a post, you normally send a body. In this case, we know we need username and password. Username, oh, it's JSON. I need to quote it. Test, let's get this wrong and make sure we get an error. And we'll also say test. Let's send this post and find out. Password and username do not match. Okay, they match here on my page, but do not match the mock users. So what did we put as the mock users? We put Billy the Kid and super secret. So let's have a look. Billy the Kid and super secret. And if I now send that again as a post, it says passwords and username do match. So now we've got our kind of fake logging system working. So on our Express and Node, we have get endpoints for listing users and listing a single user, but also now logging in. Or you could use this to create a user as well. A post is for creating some resource. I'm happy with that, so let's commit that and carry on. Let's see what it recommends next. It's suggesting using Postman for the request. We kind of jumped ahead and did this already. And it says once you've done this and tested it out, which we have done, close this issue and move on. Postman is really good. I do like to use it within VSCode, the REST client, because then I'm able to save the post and get commands for other people in the team to use. And you can do something similar with Postman where you can import and export different requests. And that's it. We've actually built Node and Express API. So a RESTful API that you can use to power your website. It could get data, it could save data, it can do so much. Let me know in the comments below what you will build now that you know how to use Node and know how to build a RESTful API with Express. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe below and hit the bell button so you get notified every time that I go live. I'll post a video. Thought I wasn't recording there for a second. These 2 lines of code are the typical way to get Express. Start Express, not to start, we're not starting it. That might be right. And that's it. We've now built an API using Node and REST. Node and REST? Don't forget, I think that's it. That's terrible.